The sun was blazing overhead, casting a golden shimmer across the packed beach. It was one of those perfect summer days where the sky meets the ocean in a seamless blue gradient, and everyone in the city seemed to have the same idea: escape to the shore. I remember the feeling of hot sand between my toes as I navigated through the colorful mosaic of beach towels, umbrellas, and sunbathers. The air was thick with the scent of coconut sunscreen, salt water, and that indescribable summer energy that makes everything feel possible. I hadn't planned on going to the beach that day. It was a spontaneous decision after a week of monotonous work and lonely evenings. Something inside me was craving adventure, connection, anything to break the routine that had slowly been suffocating my spirit. Little did I know that this impulsive beach trip would lead to an encounter that would change everything. The beach was absolutely packed, as I mentioned. Finding a spot to settle down seemed nearly impossible. People were practically stacked on top of each other, families with elaborate setups of coolers and tents, groups of friends playing volleyball, couples sharing towels and whispers. And me, just me, with a small backpack containing a water bottle, a worn paperback, and a hastily applied layer of sunscreen that I could already feel surrendering to the persistent heat. As I scanned the crowded shoreline, my eyes were drawn to the lifeguard stations dotting the beach. There was something about them, those elevated chairs that seemed to exist in their own space, above the chaos. The lifeguards themselves appeared so confident, so at ease in their environment, watching over everyone with a sense of purpose I'd been lacking lately. One station in particular caught my attention. It was unoccupied, which seemed strange given how every other inch of the beach was claimed. Let me explain why this empty lifeguard chair mattered so much in that moment. It wasn't just a seat. It represented a vantage point, a different perspective on this crowded world. From up there, you could see everything: the patterns of the waves, the movement of the crowds, the bigger picture that gets lost when you're just another person on a towel. And honestly, I was tired of being just another person on a towel, both literally and metaphorically in my life. I made my way toward the empty chair, my pace quickening as I noticed others eyeing it as well. It wasn't an official lifeguard station, but rather one of those public chairs designed to mimic them: tall, wooden structures that offered shade and an elevated view. These chairs were scattered across the beach as decorative seating, but on a day like today, they were as coveted as front-row tickets to a sold-out concert. As I got closer, I noticed someone else approaching from the opposite direction. He moved with purpose, with confidence, cutting through the crowd like he belonged everywhere he went. Our eyes met briefly across the distance, and I felt a jolt of something: competition, perhaps, but also something else I couldn't quite name. He was tall, with sun-kissed skin that suggested he spent most of his days outdoors. His hair was tousled by the sea breeze, and even from afar, I could see the brightness of his smile. We reached the chair at almost exactly the same moment, both of us slightly out of breath from our beach obstacle course. Up close, I could see that he was wearing red swim shorts, actual lifeguard attire, though he wasn't on duty. His eyes were the color of the ocean on a clear day, and when he smiled directly at me, I felt my carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. "Looks like we had the same idea," he said, his voice carrying easily over the beach noise. There was a playfulness in his tone that immediately put me at ease. "Great minds," I replied, trying to match his casual confidence, but feeling my heart race in a way that had nothing to do with my hurried walk across the beach. "I'm Ethan," he said, extending his hand. "Off-duty lifeguard and professional beach bum." "Alex," I responded, taking his hand and noting how warm it felt against mine. "Amateur beachgoer and professional overthinker." He laughed at that, a genuine laugh that made the corners of his eyes crinkle. "Well, Alex the overthinker, what do you say we share this throne? It's the last one available, and I'm feeling generous today." Before I could respond, a group of teenagers approached, eyeing the chair with obvious intention. "Looks like we've got competition," I murmured to Ethan. "Then we better stake our claim." He replied with a wink that sent an unexpected shiver down my spine despite the heat. What happened next was a blur of movement and laughter. Ethan grabbed my hand, a gesture so unexpected yet so natural that I didn't even think to pull away, and we both lunged for the chair. I remember the feeling of his fingers intertwined with mine, strong and secure, as we claimed our prize seconds before the teenagers arrived. "Sorry, guys," Ethan called out to them with that easy charm. Maybe next time. The teenagers shrugged good-naturedly and moved on, leaving us victorious, but with a new dilemma. We were two grown men with one chair. I was about to suggest we take turns when Ethan solved the problem in a way I never would have dared propose. "Come here," he said, settling into the chair and patting his lap. "There's room for both of us." Time seemed to stop as I processed his invitation. My mind raced with questions and concerns. What would people think? Was this too forward? What did it mean? But for once, I didn't let my overthinking win. Something about Ethan, about this day, about the sun and the sea and the feeling of possibility in the air, made me brave. I sat down on his lap, tentatively at first, ready to jump up at the first sign of discomfort or regret. But instead of awkwardness, I felt an immediate sense of rightness, of comfort that defied explanation. Ethan's arms came around me naturally, not constraining but supporting, as if we'd sat this way 100 times before. "See? Perfect fit," he said near my ear, his breath warm against my neck. "Now we have the best seat on the beach." And he was right, we did. From our elevated position, the beach spread out before us like a living painting. The ocean stretched to the horizon, waves breaking in hypnotic patterns. Children built sandcastles and chased the tide, couples walked hand in hand along the shoreline, friends shared stories and laughter over coolers of drinks. It was humanity in all its beautiful, messy glory, and we were watching it all unfold from our shared perch. "So, Alex the overthinker," Ethan began, his voice vibrating slightly against my back. "What brings you to the beach alone today?" There was something about sitting there, above the world yet intimately connected to this stranger, that made honesty feel not just possible but necessary. "I needed to escape," I admitted. "My life has been feeling predictable, safe, but in a suffocating way. I woke up this morning and couldn't face another day of the same routine." Ethan nodded, and I could feel the movement against my shoulder. "I understand that more than you might think. That's why I became a lifeguard, actually. I was on track to join my family's accounting firm, had the degree and everything. But the thought of spending my life in an office made me feel like I was drowning before I'd even started." "So you decided to save others from drowning instead?" I asked, turning slightly to see his face. He laughed. "Something like that. My parents weren't thrilled, but I've never regretted it. Every day is different. Every person I meet changes me in some small way." His eyes met mine. Like today. The directness of his gaze, the implication in his words. It should have made me nervous, should have activated all my usual defenses. But sitting there, cradled between his strength and the vast openness of the ocean, I felt a rare sense of peace. We talked for what felt like hours, but could have been minutes. Time seemed to operate differently in our little elevated world. Ethan told me about growing up in a coastal town, about his first rescue as a lifeguard, about his dream of starting a water safety program for underprivileged kids. I shared stories about my work as a graphic designer, my love of old movies, my childhood fear of the ocean that I'd only recently overcome. "Wait, you were afraid of the ocean?" Ethan asked, genuine surprise in his voice. "And yet here you are, at the beach by yourself?" I nodded. "That's part of why I came today. I've been trying to face the things that scare me. Small steps toward a braver life, I guess." His arms tightened slightly around me. "Well, sitting on a stranger's lap certainly qualifies as brave in my book." We both laughed, and I realized how comfortable I'd become in this unusual position. The initial awkwardness had completely dissolved, replaced by a connection that felt simultaneously new and familiar, exciting and comfortable. As we continued talking, I became aware of subtle shifts in our position. Ethan's hand moving to rest on my hip, my body relaxing further into his chest, our breathing gradually synchronizing. None of it was overtly sexual, yet there was an undeniable intimacy to it, a physical conversation happening alongside our verbal one. "You know," Ethan said after a comfortable pause in our conversation, "I come to this beach almost every day, even when I'm not working, and I've never shared my chair with anyone before." "I'm honored," I replied, only half joking. "What made today different?" He was quiet for a moment, and I could almost feel him considering his answer. "Honestly, something about the way you were looking at the beach when you arrived. Like you were searching for something more than just a place to sit. I recognized that look because I've felt it myself. Before I could respond, a commotion erupted nearby. A child was crying, and a woman, presumably his mother, was calling for help. Without hesitation, Ethan gently moved me off his lap and stood up. "Sorry," he said quickly. "Old habits." I watched as he jogged over to the situation. Even off duty, he carried himself with the alertness and purpose of someone trained to respond to emergencies. The issue, it turned out, was relatively minor. The child had stepped on a sharp shell and gotten a small cut on his foot, but Ethan handled it with the same care and attention I imagined he would give a major crisis. He knelt down to the child's level, spoke softly to him while examining the cut, then retrieved a small first aid kit from his backpack that I hadn't even noticed he was carrying. The whole scene lasted maybe 5 minutes, but it revealed so much about Ethan's character, his instinct to help, his gentleness, his preparedness. As I watched him bandage the child's foot and make him laugh through his tears, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just attraction or the thrill of a chance encounter. This was admiration, a recognition of goodness that went beyond physical appeal or easy charm. When Ethan returned to our chair, there was a moment where we both hesitated. Would we return to our previous position, or had the interruption broken the spell? But then he smiled and sat down, patting his lap once more, and I found myself settling back into what already felt like my place. "Sorry about that," he said. "The lifeguard in me never really turns off." "Don't apologize," I replied sincerely. "It was impressive. You made that kid's day better in an instant." He shrugged, but I could tell he appreciated the acknowledgement. It's the little emergencies that add up, you know? Everyone focuses on the dramatic rescues, but most of what we do is small moments of help. Like offering your lap to a stranger who needs a place to sit, I suggested with a smile. His laugh vibrated through both of us. Exactly like that, though I should confess that wasn't entirely altruistic. The afternoon continued in this way, conversation flowing easily, punctuated by comfortable silences and gradual increases in physical closeness. At some point, Ethan's hand found mine, and our fingers intertwined as naturally as if they'd been designed to fit together. The sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, casting everything in a golden glow that made the moment feel even more dreamlike. "I should probably get going soon," I said reluctantly, noticing how the beach had begun to empty as the day waned. "I didn't plan to stay this long." "Plans change," Ethan replied, his voice soft. "Sometimes for the better." He was right, of course. My impulsive beach trip had transformed into something I could never have planned or expected. As if reading my thoughts, Ethan continued, "I'm really glad you decided to fight me for this chair today." "Me too," I admitted. "Though I think we both know you could have easily claimed it without me." "Where would the fun be in that?" he asked, and I could hear the smile in his voice without needing to see it. "Besides, I believe in fate sometimes. When I saw you walking across the beach, something told me I needed to meet you." It was the kind of line that would normally make me roll my eyes or put up my guard. But after hours of genuine conversation, of learning the contours of Ethan's character and sharing pieces of myself I rarely revealed, it didn't feel like a line at all. It felt like truth. "I don't usually do this," Ethan said, a note of uncertainty in his voice for the first time. "But would you want to get dinner? There's a great little place just up from the beach. Nothing fancy, but the seafood is fresh and they make a mean margarita." The question hung between us, weighted with possibility. This was the moment where the magic of our beach encounter would either extend into the real world or remain a perfect, isolated memory. I thought about all the reasons to say no. We'd just met. I hadn't planned for this. I wasn't dressed for dinner. I had work tomorrow. All the practical, sensible reasons that my overthinking brain usually prioritized. But then I thought about how it had felt to sit with Ethan, to talk and laugh and simply be, without pretense or expectation. I thought about the way he'd helped that child, the passion in his voice when he talked about water safety, the gentle strength of his hands holding mine. And I realized that sometimes the bravest thing isn't facing your fears, but embracing unexpected joy. "I'd love that," I said, turning to meet his eyes directly. "But only if you promise to tell me more about that water safety program you want to start. I might have some ideas about logo design." His smile in that moment was brighter than the setting sun, a promise of possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to imagine before today. "It's a date, then," he said, and the word date sent a pleasant shiver through me. As we finally vacated our shared chair and gathered our belongings, I looked back at it. This ordinary wooden structure that had somehow become the setting for an extraordinary connection. "Thank you for sharing your throne," I said, only half joking. Ethan looked at the chair, then back at me, his expression softening. "You know, they say these chairs are designed to give lifeguards the best view of the water, to help them spot trouble and save lives." He took my hand again, his touch now familiar, yet still thrilling. But today, it gave me the best view of something much more important. We walked away from the chair, away from the beach where we'd met just hours ago as strangers, and toward an evening that would be the first of many we'd share. The sun continued its descent, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that seemed to mirror the warmth spreading through my chest. That lifeguard chair became a symbol for us, a reminder of how something as simple as a place to sit can become the starting point for a journey neither of us saw coming. In the weeks and months that followed, we'd return to that beach, to that chair, marking the evolution of our relationship against the constant backdrop of the ocean. Sometimes Ethan would be on duty, and I'd watch him from a distance, still amazed by his capability and care. Other times, we'd claim our chair together, no longer needing the excuse of scarcity to sit close, to share space, to belong to each other. But no matter how many times we returned, no matter how our story unfolded, nothing would ever quite match the magic of that first day. When he and I grabbed the last lifeguard chair, when he pulled me onto his lap, and when I finally stopped overthinking long enough to let something beautiful begin. Total _char_count, 18,648.